The Republican Party is conservative, not Christian. Now, there might be Christians within the conservative party. There might be a lot of conservative talking points that appeal to Christians, but the party itself is not inherently Christian. Not too long ago, I was checking the mail, and while I was checking the mail, someone approached me. I didn't know who he was. And he was this tall, slender man. And I say, "How can I help you?" And he says to me, "Hey, so my name is such and such. I'm running for local office." I said, "Oh, okay. Which party are you in?" He says, "The Republican Party." I say, "Okay. So what do you believe?" And he says, "Oh, I believe in what the people believe, and I represent the people, and I'm here to defend the people. What do you believe?" I say, "Well, for one, I don't believe that there should be a lot of this deviant sexual education in schools, for one." And he says, "Oh, yeah, I totally hate that. I hate when they add that sort of stuff in their curriculums. What else?" And so I said, "Hey, wait a minute. Why are you asking me what I believe? Shouldn't you be telling me what you believe?" I didn't say this, but I thought this to myself. Because what he was clearly doing is he was trying to calibrate his answers to me, and he was trying to see where I'm coming from. Because if he could figure out where I'm coming from, then he could position himself as the politician for me so he could win my vote. And unfortunately, this is the reality of a democracy. In a democracy, if you want to gain votes, you don't gain votes by disagreeing with the masses. You gain votes by being as aligned with as many people as possible on as many issues as possible. And that's the reality of it. And so, thankfully, till now, there is still a huge undercurrent of Protestantism, Catholicism, to a much lesser extent right now, Orthodoxy. And there are still a lot of fundamental Christian values that exist in America, even as the apparatus and the robust theology behind them have kind of wavered away throughout time. People might be a lot more secularized, but the foundation of Christian principles are still what the majority in the country believe. Consider this analogy. Let's say you have a cauldron and you're trying to make some stew in the cauldron. So you take the cauldron, you add all of your ingredients. You add broth, you add chicken, you add vegetables, and you heat up the cauldron and you make this nice, tasty soup. And it's nice. Now, if you want to keep the soup warm, what you would do is you would keep a little bit of a fire, a little bit of a flame underneath the soup so it stays nice and hot and hearty. But what happens when you turn off the fire and you turn off the heat under that cauldron is the cauldron slowly starts to get colder and colder and colder. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not like you turn off the fire and suddenly the cauldron is freezing. That's not what happens. What happens is just bit by bit, slowly and over time, this cauldron gets cold. And in the same way, that's what happens to Christian principles when the country starts to become more and more secularized. Since it had Christianity as its foundation, it doesn't immediately become chaos. It doesn't immediately become a third world country. What happens is bit by bit, we start to lose our way. Bit by bit, we start to try to teach deviant sexual education in the schools. Bit by bit, we're becoming more violent. Bit by bit, we are losing our identity as what was at its foundation, a Protestant nation. And so, if we did have a politician who was in office who wanted to create a sort of campaign around not only having the Christian ethics and virtues, because it's these ethics and virtues that are most accessible to most people. Most people understand do not lie. Most people understand do not steal because of their Christian heritage. But a lot of people don't understand whether or not, for example, there is absolute divine simplicity or any other much more dense theological concept. And if we have a situation where we're constantly forgetting theology and we're constantly forgetting our heritage, And we're so focused on just morals. Eventually, what happens and what has happened is people will start asking, hey, wait a minute, why is this good and ethical, but not that? And we start to have the moral relativists. We start to have the people who say, hey, maybe engaging in the LG Skittles stuff is acceptable. Maybe it is moral. And churches will start to pick up on this, and you'll start having churches that allow and facilitate and even encourage rainbow behavior. And thankfully, what I've also noticed is there is a bit of a theological revival that's occurring. There are a lot of guys who are really digging deep, and they're learning about the church fathers, and they're learning about the Christian heritage, which we've inherited. And since that's the case, there is a bit more of that robust Christianity and theology, the underpinnings of the morality itself. You cannot have the morality without the doctrine, without the mysticism and spirituality underneath it. And there's been a little bit of a comeback of that lately, but I haven't seen any of the politicians really gravitate towards that. All the politicians really talk about are the moral talking points. And that's something I think that needs to change. Recently, Trump did this interview, and they were asking Trump, hey, Trump, what would you say is your favorite verse in the Bible? And Trump couldn't answer the question. He says, oh, well, the Bible is my favorite book. I'll link it in the description, this clip. He says, the Bible is my favorite book. And, I like the Bible. And then the interviewer says, surely you can name a verse if it's your favorite book. There's a favorite verse from the Bible that you must have. And Trump says, I don't know. I love the whole thing. This sort of talk. And that needs to change, I think, a little bit. We need to be a lot more into the idea of promoting the Christian heritage that we have in the West. And we now also have situations where the Republican Party will bring on people of pagan faiths, for example, to go and pray in front of Congress or pray at some meeting that they're having. You've seen this, where it might not be a Christian. It might be someone, I don't want to name any particular faith, but they come in there and they talk about it as if we're all worshiping God. God is awesome. We all believe in God. But not every religion believes in God. And according to the Bible, every religion that doesn't believe in the Christian God actually believes in a demon. All of the gods of the pagans, all of the gods of the Far East, all of the fake gods, all of the idols are demonic. They're not the true God. There's only one true God. In my church, the Coptic church, we have a verse, and it says, who is likened unto you among the gods? You are the true God, the performer of miracles. And there are no other gods. And I'd like to see that more in politics. I'd like to see that more in the Republican Party. It's great that we can come together and agree that we don't want men in women's bathrooms. That's great. It's great that we can come together and decide we don't want men in women's sports. It's super low-hanging fruit. It's great that we can all come around and say that these obviously wrong and immoral things we can all agree on. But until we can explicitly say that it is the Christian God, the triune God, that is the God of our nation, until then, the Republican Party remains a conservative party, but not necessarily a Christian party.